into his own. I watched the Jaguars, and my takeaway was, I wonder if they're a playoff team. I honestly, what did you make of that game?
Yeah, going into the game, and we said it in the open, that the 5 weeks prior to that game against Dallas down in Jacksonville that we called last week, Trevor Lawrence was playing as well as any quarterback, maybe outside of Mahomes and Josh Allen. He was playing that good, 10 touchdowns, no picks. They were rolling. They were 3-2. It was kind of an up and down, win one, lose one kind of deal. Then they go and they beat Tennessee, and all of a sudden people say, could they win that division, right? Like everyone just assumed Tennessee's going to run away with it. But now they have Dallas coming into town. They'll come back down to earth, and they'll be out of the playoff picture. They come back from 17 down. We think the game halfway through the third quarter is over. Next thing you know, Trevor Lawrence rolls him back, takes him to overtime, and they get a walk-off pick six. I mean, I don't know if any of us saw it coming, but going in, we knew Jacksonville was pretty talented on offense. We weren't sure how their defense was going to hold up against Dallas, but they made the plays when they had to, and I think Trevor Lawrence is now playing like the guy we all thought he was coming out of Clemson.
So the Eagles will go to a backup. I don't know how many times you've seen them. I'm sure a couple. My takeaway is Gardner Minshew is more than capable of winning with these offensive and defensive lines. I really feel like there's an argument to be made that Philadelphia is the most complete team in the league, along with San Francisco. Kansas City may be better because of Mahomes. Your thoughts on Philadelphia going on the road with a backup? I think it's a winnable game. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a winnable game, and I don't want to compare the situations because I do think Jalen Hurts deserves to be in the MVP race along with Mahomes and the usual suspects, Josh Allen and what those guys do on a year-in basis. But what Jalen Hurts has meant to that offense, the entire offense has really been built around him, his running, his dual kind of threat. We see it every week, rushing for touchdowns, checked into that draw last week, for the big touchdown against Chicago. But having said that, I do think there is some similarities between the supporting cast around him and the supporting cast around, Brock Purdy in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I think for Gardner Minshew, similar to how it is for Brock Purdy, they don't have to. They have the play caller. They have the offensive line. They have the skill talent around them, and they have the dominant defense, right? So there's a lot of similar boxes that both teams check. Again, I'm not, Jalen Hurts deserves all the credit that he deserves for carrying that team and being a big part, but it is not a one-man show. And it's very similar to what Micah Parsons said last week, and everyone jumped on him. You can say Jalen Hurts should be in the conversation for the MVP, and I hope this injury doesn't take him out of it. But it's also not a knock on Jalen Hurts to say he's playing on a really good team with other really good players. I think both of those things can be true.
Is there anything, I didn't think Dak played poorly at all. I thought he got kind of a bad bounce, interception, it happens. But if I said to you, Dallas, what concerns you going into the playoffs? Is there something now that you've done a couple of games, you've done multiple, that you think to yourself, I see this little trend, I see this weakness? Because when you get to the playoffs, it's the best coaches and the best rosters. So any little crevice, Greg, becomes a hole. Right? Like the good coaches find what you do poorly and attack it. Some of these teams you play now in the regular season, they can't attack it. They don't have the personnel. What concerns you about Dallas?
The last 2 games that they've lost, we've called both. So Dallas fans probably think it's our fault. We had the overtime game. I'm sure they hate when Burkhardt and I call their games because I'm sure somehow it's our fault that Dak had a ball bounce off Noah Brown's chest for a pick six. But no, so in all seriousness, we saw them lose a 14-point lead in Green Bay a few weeks back. They went to overtime. They lost. We saw them lose a 17-point lead down in Jacksonville. Those are the only 2 games they've lost in the last, call it, 2 months. What's weird, though, is typically teams that do these 2 things well close games with a lead. Offensively, if you can run the ball,
dominant.
And now you have the lead.
Year 2.
Typically, that's a great close. And then on the defensive side of the ball, can you rush the passer?
The
other teams playing from behind turns into a drop-back game.
From going on
Both of those things are 2 of the biggest strengths that Dallas has. So I'm just trying to figure out why, when they get these double-digit and 2-score, and now in the last week 3-score games, with them being able to run the ball as well as they do with Pollard and Zeke, with Dak at quarterback, and then the pass rush that they have on defense, why can't they close these games out against, on paper at least, inferior teams to them, talent-wise and whatnot? That, to me, I don't know if I have the answer yet, but that, to me, is probably the biggest concern. If you go in and you just lay an egg and a game gets away from you early, That could happen really to any team in the league. But to get up 14-17 in the second half and then not finish it, to me, that's the concern with Dallas.
You know, I'm going to ask on your expertise of playing a decade and a half in the NFL. Is that I go back, the most recent example is Brady's 7-5. They get a bye week. They cinch everything together. They play Atlanta, Detroit, get confidence and win. I watched Detroit, and I'm like, something's happened in the last 6 weeks. They play with a lot more swagger. Hutchison now using the hands better. The rookie edge, he is more disruptive. The defense isn't great, but it's playing a little downhill. They're getting healthier. It's like, I would not want to play Detroit. They got nothing to lose. Dan Campbell's totally got the room believing in him. Did you ever play in a team, maybe it was Carolina, where like post-Thanksgiving something happens and the team changes, the chemistry changes in the room?
Yeah, and you can feel it. You can feel when that happens. And that's why, there's the saying, the only way to create a winning culture is to win. Winning feeds itself. Last year we did Detroit at home against Green Bay. Green Bay had locked up their playoff seed. Detroit was playing for nothing. Rodgers played the first half. They benched him. Dan Campbell came out that game. They were running fake punts and flea flickers and you name it. He emptied the bag and they won. And everyone walked away and said, wow, they won a meaningless game of week 18. Who cares? And we said it on the broadcast, like, no, he's trying to create this culture that we expect to win every time we step on the field, because you can say it. You can put up signs in the locker room. You can put up all these fancy slogans on T-shirts. But until you experience winning, you can't create a winning culture. And I think all of that history, all that foundation that he's laid over the last couple of years, even early in this year when I think they started 1-4, 1-3, whatever it was, we had them early when they beat Green Bay. And I think from that point on, they are probably one of the most interesting and fun stories, maybe in the entire league over the back half of the season. I think the offensive coordinator is a stud. I think my prediction, he becomes an offensive head coach somewhere this hiring cycle, Ben Johnson. Dan Campbell deserves more credit for his intellect, for his brain. I think a lot of people base him on that initial press conference of biting everyone in the kneecaps.
Yeah.
But when you speak to him and when you actually are around him, he is highly thoughtful, very smart, has a great pulse of his team, and does a lot of interesting things. And I think we have to give all the credit in the world to Jared Goff. I mean, he was thrown to the Wolves, has to see his replacement, Matt Stafford, win a Super Bowl. Like, I don't care how much money you've made. I don't care how strong of a person you are. To get thrown out to Detroit and watch the guy they traded for you win his Super Bowl with your team in year one, that had to be tough. I don't care who you are. For him to now have the success that he's had and kind of revitalize that organization, I think there's a lot of people who deserve credit there. I think the roster's okay. I don't think it's amazing. I think they're getting the most out of it, but they can sense something's turning. And when you have a young, talented group that's still learning the game and they feel that confidence, like you mentioned, it's real and it feeds itself. And Dan Campbell's doing a hell of a job changing that culture there. And we've seen it now for the last couple of weeks.
All right. Finally, just a minute left. Your thoughts, Brock Purdy. I've said this before. There's something there. He's a 4-year starter in college. You have to be so talented to be a 4-year starter at a Power 5 school. And by the way, he generally played on teams less talented than Oklahoma State. So he was often having to make stuff happen to win games. Like this Iowa State, you got to carry it. Can that kid win multiple playoff games?
Can he be the quarterback of multiple winning games? Absolutely. Is he going to have to, at some point, carry the load and make some critical plays? Is he going to have to lead a 2-minute drive at the end of the half? Is he going to have to hit some third and longs because maybe they don't get first and second down or they got to overcome a penalty? Yes. Right now, their style of play fits the young rookie, fits the kid who's just kind of learning. And I don't mean that as a knock. I think we saw him make his debut. He was unbelievable against Tampa. He was throwing the ball. They were aggressive. Shanahan was not babying him. I think in his second start, I'm trying to remember. I saw it was the national game. Oh, it was Seattle. He had some ups and the downs. He hit Diggs kind of in the chest. Fortunately, they dropped the ball. So he had a couple plays that kind of went his way. But I think he's shown that when Shanahan needs him to go out there and make a play, he can. But Shanahan also understands he does not need to overwhelm this young kid. He has talent around him. Hopefully they get Debo back. Brandon Ayuk's playing well. Kittle's really starting to come on these last couple games. Of course, McCaffrey is one of the best in the leagues, has the O-line, and then the defense is one or two, however you want to slice it, top in the league. So the formula is there. The system by design is not an overly quarterback dependent system. That's